Good evening. Today is Tuesday, February 11th, and the time is 6:30 p.m., and I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Delory, Webb,
Here.
Stiegel,
Here.
Onken,
Here.
Caliphut,
Here.
Haupt, Serrato.
Okay, we've got a quorum. Thank you. Item number 2, introduction of new member. Welcome and introduction of new Planning and Zoning Commission member George Caliphut, seat 5.
Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners. Hope you all are having a good evening on this nice rainy night. Mr. Caliphut is joining us tonight for the first night. So he was appointed on February 4th. City Council filled the position. He is appointed to replace Commissioner Shields. She resigned back in January, I believe. And then his term is expiring in September, so he's finishing out hers. And so he'll be eligible for 2 full terms after he finishes this complete term. Mr. Caliphut is a graduate of Kent State University. He has a background in construction management. He has his Texas real estate license, has 10 plus years of commercial real estate development. So a little quote here he shared with us on his application. He wants to ensure that decisions we make today will lead to a thriving, vibrant city for future generations. Sure you don't have a planning background, sir? Serving on the commission would allow him to bring his experience, insights, and passion for our community to the table, helping to guide the responsible growth of the place he proudly calls home. So appreciate having you here. We're excited what you can bring to the commission. So welcome.
What a statement. Yes. It's beautiful. Okay, welcome to the commission. We'll move to item number 3, approval of minutes. Consider approval of the Planning and Zoning Commission January 28, 2025 regular meeting minutes. We would need a motion to...
Motion to approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Houck and a second from Commissioner Webb. All those in favor of approving the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Great, that motion will carry. Item number 4, citizen comment period with the Planning and Zoning Commission. Citizen comment period. The Planning and Zoning Commission welcomes comments from citizens early in the agenda of regular meetings. Speakers are provided with an opportunity to speak during this time period on any agenda item or any other matter concerning city business, and they must observe the 3-minute time limit. So at this time, I'll open public comments, citizen comments. Okay, doesn't look like we have any tonight, so we'll keep going and close those. Consider impossible action, item number 5.3. Consider approval of a conditional use permit for a retail store located at 1600 Bunton Creek Road, Dollar General CUP-24-0122. Ms. Sharp.
Good evening, Kayla Sharp, Senior Planner. So tonight we have a conditional use permit for a Dollar General store located at 1600 Bunton Creek Road. Maybe. There we go. Oh, of course now it's going to fly through them. All right. So this is going to be just a little over a 10,000 square foot retail store. It is between Lehman High School and the existing self-storage facility on Bunton Creek Road. This site is located in the Goforth Road Overlay District, which has less stringent requirements than the I-35 overlay does. So this building will be a prefabricated metal building with masonry cladding the front facade. So here are those elevations, with, of course, the front elevation being the side that faces Bunton Creek Road. And then the dumpster enclosure to match the masonry on the front of the building. Here is the site plan. Just want to make sure to point out that as part of the site plan, you might notice that there is less parking than is required by code. A few of you were on the commission at the time. Some of you are new, but a few months back they did receive a exception to our parking requirements to have less parking than the minimum required due to right-of-way acquisition for the city's road bond project. And then here is the landscaping plan, and here's where you can really see some of that right-of-way that's being acquired on the front of Bunton Creek Road. photometric sheet. And then, since we have several new members, I just wanted to highlight some of the standards for review. These standards apply to all of our overlay districts. So these are things that are within your purview to review, request modifications for, et cetera. So you have height, building mass, architectural details, roofing, building materials, color, texture, compatibility of design and materials, landscape plan, vehicular and pedestrian access, signage, and exterior lighting. Based on the Goforth Road overlay and the retail services zoning, staff has found this request to be compliant, and we are recommending approval. So your options tonight are approve, approve with modifications, or deny. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions?
If you go back to the site plan, where's the dumpster pad, where's the dumpster located?
So this one's probably going to be the most clear for you to see. If you're looking at the site, it is at the bottom right.
Okay, got it.
These things are a little hard to read for me. Trying to find out where the sidewalks, there's one sidewalk entry, it looks like.
So there is one sidewalk connecting from Button Creek Road to the front door.
Okay.
I will say the city is constructing the sidewalk as part of the Button Creek Road Bond project. So for the time being, until that road is constructed, I believe they have already, if not, they will be paying the sidewalk fee in lieu
Okay.
for their portion of the
Does where
sidewalk
that-
that would ultimately get ripped out when
Gotcha.
we construct the road.
Rough. Is it going to line up with a crosswalk eventually? Because I know across the street, there's that big neighborhood back there. If people want to walk over to that, it's not going to be easy to cross Goforth without a,
I'm not sure if there's a crosswalk planned right there as part of the road bond, but
Okay.
the driveways do line up with the Sapphire Lake Drive.
okay. Do we have any concerns about the side of the building looking like a warehouse in the middle of a neighborhood?
Hang on, let's wait and see if, well, I guess it's still your time technically, so you can expound on that if you,
Yeah, it's just sitting across the street from a neighborhood, and it's a Dollar General, and they all kind of look the same, I know, but the siding doesn't really vibe with the town in general. Is there any way they would be willing to put masonry on at least the sides so that you can't see it from the roadway?
That is within your purview to request modifications. We do have the applicant here as well, if you'd like to ask them if they'd be.
Is that too
willing.
big of a lift for y'all?
Typically, it's gonna be oh, sorry.
And then if you can
Yeah.
share your name as well, please.
My name's Ben Barrier. I'm with the developer Streamline. Typically, they're kind of a budget killer, and that's why they're done the way they are. This one's tucked in there, like surrounded by that storage unit that's already there, and then the high school, so it's not as big of an eyesore if you're living, because you're only facing the neighbors across the street. But yeah, typically the full-side masonry will kill the deal.
Fair enough. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have any other questions for me? I'll do the best to answer. I'm the acquisition guy. My engineer couldn't be here, so I'm the yes man, but I'll try and make it work. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I do have a question for you before you sit down. I was going to give someone else a chance to ask you a question, though, if someone on the commission had one. Okay. So I did have a similar concern to Commissioner Halk about that when I was looking at where this was. The adjacent uses, people are going to be driving in there for the storage facility, for the high school. And so there is use on those two sides. Like the back of it, I don't really care what the back of it looks
Right.
like, but for the sides, because that's an active area. If we can't do full masonry because of cost reasons, which I understand, would y'all be open to doing brick wainscoting or pilasters or just some sort of ornamentation on there so it vibes
I
better?
think so. I mean, I have to budget it and see, but I think we're open to anything to make it work.
Okay.
It'll just really come down to if it's still pencils.
What can afford, yeah.
But we're open to working with y'all on anything.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
To kind of expand on what Chairperson Ogden was saying, I'd like to bring it up because giving artists some money to put up some really cool art on the sides of buildings is something we should always think about, I think. Y'all okay with murals on the side of that?
I don't think Dollar General corporate would be on board with that.
Okay, so this is not a franchise location where y'all have the full power to,
Right now, they'll be
Okay.
controlling it all.
okay.
I have an observation that, about this location. I was concerned about what you folks have been talking about. It seems to me that it is tucked in this area and not very visible on a couple of the sides. And I've noticed that on that property, particularly in the easement and the setback, there's no room for landscaping really without interfering with utilities, it would seem. So doing landscaping would not seem to be an option, but I would agree that perhaps some architectural features, particularly on the side facing Lehman, is my biggest concern. Might be nice, but and the other walls as well, exterior walls. One of the concerns I have past screening of that particular building and making it more architecturally attractive is that intersection of Sapphire and the driveway and then the storage facility next door. That looks like that could be a pinch point for traffic. I forget, did we have a traffic study there or anything similar to that?
I don't believe so. That storage facility has been there for quite some time. So I'm not sure if we have, an up-to-date traffic study or anything like that. There is a platted cross-access easement for the two to share
Yeah.
access through that drive-through.
Because I know historically on Button Creek, of course, there's been a lot of concerns about traffic. And if there's a pinch neck there around high school traffic, a store and so forth, that would be of concern. But I'll leave that to engineers, I suppose. But I appreciate the architectural detail part the most that you brought up because I don't think landscaping is feasible on a couple of sides of the building. So I would agree that I would like to see features of some kind.
Got it. I'm trying to think, landscaping is also a good idea where possible. I know they had to cut out 2 little portions for trees, because we have our first comments back from y'all, and so we've added in some changes. So we added in some landscaping along the front, but we can probably do that and maybe some brick features on the side or something.
Yeah. So regarding landscaping, I don't know if this is a question for staff or for y'all, but I did appreciate the mountain laurels on those brick walls on the front to add some beauty to those
Yes.
to those walls. So thank you for that. A question about the east line of the property. There's a line of the Lacey Oaks right along that property line. And when I was looking at this area, the street view, I noticed there's already a row of trees right along that same line on the storage facilities property. I just wanted to make sure that those are not the same trees. There will be new trees going in, as shown on the image here. And has staff looked at, are those tree species and sizes and everything going to be compatible so that we have a bunch of pretty happy trees and not trees that are fighting to survive over each other?
We'll definitely make sure to go back and double check that on our next round of review. This site plan and landscape plan are still in review at the moment, so we still have time to
Okay.
take a look at that and address that.
I very much appreciate that. It would not look pretty if there were like tree, stump, stump, tree, stump, stump, Let them all grow and thrive. Okay. Are there any other questions for staff?
I would just say for, if you're choosing to make modifications, if you could be as specific as possible, but then maybe provide some flexibility if available for staff to review that. And then if not, maybe they could come back if they choose not to do, for example, anything that you would recommend, or, if they don't want to meet any of the recommended modifications or changes.
Okay. So I did tinker with the idea of a motion, so I'll go ahead and throw that out there and see if anybody wants to second it. I motion to conditionally approve the conditional use permit for Dollar General, given that the sides of the building have brick enhancements, subject to review by the city planning department.
Second.
Okay. So a motion to conditionally approve made by myself, Chairwoman Onken, and seconded by Vice Chair Stiegel. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Again, the motion is to conditionally approve with modifications for brick enhancements. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Great, that motion passes.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, next up, we have item 5.4, consider approval of a conditional use permit for a warehouse building located at 161 Weldon Johnston Way, Amazing Ice Designs, CUP-24-0109. Mr. Lutz.
Yes, so the applicant tonight is looking to develop a 1.14 acre lot. This is one that he's looking to develop is 181 Weldon Johnson Way. Property is zoned warehouse. It's in the I-35 overlay district. And so this is a CUP for the building elevations, facade, and landscaping. So here on the site plan, there was a typo on that slide that I didn't fix. It's 161 Weldon Johnson Way in red. That is the building he's looking to construct. This building has a sister building at 181 Weldon Johnson Way. So I wanted to call these out because the two buildings have a little bit of history together that I kind of want to go over with y'all tonight. So when we look at this property, it began in 2015. It's a two-lot development, both addresses, 161, 181. They were designed to originally face each other, and that CUP with that design was approved in 2015, but only 181 was constructed. So 161 was then to be developed in 2019. The building was actually reoriented to better match the I-35 overlay, face the front. And then P&Z approved that CUP. However, due to COVID, the project was placed on hold, and that CUP did expire at that time. So then in 2023, the applicant began having project discussions with the city staff regarding the building, specifically the percentage of masonry that is required in the I-35 overlay. So that was when we got that site plan. I commented on that and made those comments, and so he wanted to kind of discuss those options. So the applicant expressed his desire to move forward with the original design. Again, it was approved a couple of times. So staff considered the request. The applicant did agree to increase the masonry totals on what he was originally proposing. But again, he wants to ensure that the buildings would somewhat match each other, have that consistent look. Again, these are both kind of brother-sister buildings, so to speak. So again, the original buildings that were approved had approximately 20% masonry. The applicant is proposing to increase that number to approximately 30%. All other aspects of the development do meet the I-35 overlay, so especially landscaping, orientation. The only deficiency would be on the overhead doors, which require 50% segmented glass. So I think you guys are all familiar kind of with that issue. Regarding some of these buildings. I would like to note that segmented glass doors were not required on the original building at 181. So this is the original building. These are the elevations that were approved. This is what was constructed, and this is what you'll see if you drive out there today. The applicant is proposing to match this. I will say the rendering doesn't quite match this one, but I will talk y'all through that so y'all don't think that they're completely different buildings. So if you'll note, you will find notes on the renderings as part of his submittal that says he will be matching the exterior materials on paint color and materials. So even though it looks a little bit different in color-wise, it will match the same building. So you can see here he's got some masonry on the front and sides, small pilaster in the middle. I believe he's actually increased the overhang on this structure a little bit to give it a little bit more articulation and a cover. But again, you can see the back does not have any of the segmented glass. Again, this is matching the kind of original design. It does have a wainscoting on the front, but it does not extend all the way down the sides. It's more to kind of fill those spaces between the windows. So again, I said the site plan does meet our requirements for the I-35. Elevations do not meet, just specifically masonry and overhead doors. So that's what y'all are being asked to consider tonight. So staff has a couple of options for you guys. Approve as requested, approve with modifications, and deny the request. So when we looked at this, we wanted to take into the history on this project into account. We also wanted to take into consideration those prior approvals, consistency with the development, and then the enhanced landscaping and site development. This one definitely more in line with our current regs. But modifications are at the discretion of P&Z and can cover items like building materials or landscaping. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer those, but we are recommending option 2, just to give you guys that opportunity to make those considerations. Again, when we talked last time, staff always wants to make sure that we can recommend approval on things that are meeting 100%. In this case, we do feel comfortable approving, recommending a recommendation of approval with some modifications if you choose to go that route. So I'll turn it over to you. I'd be glad to answer any questions. The applicant is here if you have any other specific questions for him as well.
I have some observations. Between 181 and 161, the new 161 would be smaller.
So a couple different things with that. Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate you catching that. By the way, on the history report, one thing he left out is when I first came down and viewed the dirt here, I actually turned left at the Dairy Queen and drove down the frontage road, which was two-way at the time. So we've changed a lot since then. A couple things of why the orientation, we squeezed the shape and to still maintain the 9,000 foot print. With rotating the building, that caused the fire lane issues. So, you know, it's a series of moving pieces and puzzles. So that then caused adjusting the drive lane, this, that, and the other, where the fire lane, what we had to do that, and you ultimately see that with fire approval for that, we're putting a gated fence on 158, so they have their fire things met. So yes, that was, again, adjusting pieces and parts to make it fit.
Mm-hmm. So you'll have one side facing 158. You'll have another side facing roughly to the northwest.
Same orientation as it originally was. All the same
So
orientation.
I-35 will be off to the northwest.
With the front
158 will be
doors,
to the east.
the doors.
Having looked at that, my one concern, I know this is a warehouse we're talking about, my one concern is some kind of, I know you probably need some protection for your site, but apart from a fence, well, as regards to fence, have you thought of a fence for that location?
I'm sorry?
Have you thought of a fence for that location?
Yes, that's required in the plot code.
Yes.
Yeah, so there is a fence that, excuse me, I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll have to, I guess it didn't show up on there or whatever, but
Yeah, I
it
couldn't
was
see
supposed
it,
to be. One of the things I don't know if you noticed that. The other thing that we did adjust in there, and after having built the first one, the eave height. The first buildings and all of our other companion sister buildings in the 10 plot lot are 20-foot eaves. So we found that really was not an efficient use of space for the tenants we have currently, so we've dropped that to 16. So as far as a look and a view, it's going to be a lower profile, especially once the trees mature. It'll hide everything a lot better.
All right. So are you planning to put a fence around it, though?
Oh, yeah,
Of
we
what
have
kind?
to. It's required.
Of what kind?
Well, the current one is a wood slatted fence that, it match everything, and I mean, it's currently stopped at one. The plot requires each individual lot to be fenced between neighbors. Since we bought both of these lots, there's actually a couple different things where we have shared use. For instance, the drive is already in on 161. So there is a joint access agreement on record for the drive aisle. Sorry, I'm gonna close my eyes, I have to go back and remember important details. But, so we've got a joint access already on record there, and then even way up on the north end of the property, because 161 was put in before the city sewer was in, so it's on septic. Our septic, we allowed a little bit of the lot from 181 to be used by 161. So there's a joint access on both ends of the plot that's recorded.
So one of my concerns is that the view from 158 and from I-35, what they're looking at. Now, this is a warehouse.
Mostly, it's going to be a fence.
Yeah, mostly it's going to be fenced, and that's what I was concerned about.
Yeah.
What I would observe, though, looking at 181, is it's a typical privacy fence that was put in there. A privacy fence, a wood privacy fence.
6-foot wooden fence, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So my observation would be the one at 181 didn't work out too well, in my opinion, in terms of its wear. I'm not suggesting you build something more durable, but I'm concerned about there being some more screening on that side where the garage doors are.
The doors are not facing, they're facing 181. So
Oh, they will be facing that way. I didn't see that in the
They're not
orientation.
facing 180, they're not facing either roadway. They're
Okay.
facing the existing building.
Oh,
The
okay.
top elevation on this exhibit is facing towards the existing building.
Okay.
So what's facing I-35 is the.
So you're really not
pedestrian-
going to see the garage doors.
Okay.
Yeah, what's facing I-35 is the pedestrian doorways, windows, and the masonry walls. And so that's the portion you'll see from I-35, this is where we added the added masonry. On the north side of the property, like you talked about, we're gonna have a 6-foot privacy fence, wooden fence with perimeter landscaping to kind of help screen the
Yeah.
development from that side. Really, the only side that doesn't have screening is the part between the buildings where we have, obviously, box truck drop-offs and deliveries for the warehouse use.
Well, I missed something then. I thought the buildings were actually facing each other, so,
So the
Original.
layout,
Okay,
that was part of the amendment that we made with this adjustment as kind of a.
Can we go back-
Accommodation to staff of saying, hey, let's make this a little more
Go back a
compliant
few slides
with the
to the
current
overlay.
I-35 overlay, and let's rotate the building, which led to some of the site modifications needed to address fire lanes, as well as the I-35 overlay. So kind of multiple different things that changed.
Go back
So
to
if
the
you look,
original.
yeah, if you go to the site
Go all
plan.
the way up to the original, there it is.
There we go. So if you look there, you can see you have the parking on the side facing I-35, the visitor and employee parking, and so that's where your man doors are, your windows, your masonry facing I-35. So we flipped that orientation from the original approved back in 2019.
And that's where you can see the drive aisle is already in.
Yeah, so we're tying into existing driveway that was constructed with the first phase of development. Again, to Jason's point in his presentation, the development as a whole was designed to be developed together. And
Right.
just from funding and permitting timelines with COVID, kind of nixed it. So we're coming back to y'all with, a slight modification, trying to address and kind of modernize it back to the current code, with the understanding that, one, we want it to match the existing building that's next door. In addition, the rest of the developments and properties that are there were before the I-35 overlay requirements, and so none of them have a lot of masonry. So for comparable rents, comparable leases, comparable just construction costs in that development, trying to not have to go completely to the 90% to align more with what's there currently.
Well, and I don't know if y'all remember or not, but I didn't find this out till after we built this, but there apparently was city funds to assist in the adding a masonry on there, which we didn't get till after the fact, and I don't think you've included that. So, I mean, I appreciate the design and what the city wants to do with our look. It's just, it's an undue burden and an extra cost that will hamper the project.
A couple of things on this project that are some added costs to consider, which is part of the reason why we're a lower masonry. We've done a lower wastewater tie-in for an extension to serve some upgrading areas. Those are requests from Public Works and the city engineer. So we've got some more expensive wastewater line construction. In addition to that, the original subdivision was designed for detention to be accounted for everything. With the modification, city staff requested us to analyze it with Atlas 14 flows. Through that analysis, we determined that there was not proper detention in the existing pond, and so we had to provide detention on site. And so that's an additional cost that has come up since the original approval in 2019 and 2015 that's been added to this project. So a couple of things that we've had to kind of work with code requirements that have kind of prevented us from being able to put that money towards the building improvements.
yeah. Thank you. I appreciate your offering this, especially since I had somehow gotten turned around on the orientation to the 181 building. It seems to me, I visited the site, and it's in a warehouse district. It has the neighboring buildings particularly 181, have a certain kind of look. I can see what you're saying, well, we'd like to match that look in particular. And given the location, and given my futile concerns about garage doors in the past regarding other businesses, I believe that, especially if it's turned around the way you've got it, I have no problem with this remaining the same, actually, because the building profile is lower. There will be screening and different things that will be appropriate there. I think if you added stone or rock or brick of any kind there, it would look out of place, actually, and not be a match for its twin building, more or less twin. So with what I see, this would be one of these cases where I say there's a long history here. There's a long history of the city involved with this, long history of you guys trying to develop this. And it's warehouse offices. Hardly even light industry, I would say. So I personally would approve this particular plan because it's just a fit, has its limitations. I understand the limitations, so here we are.
We appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing you drove by and took the time to look
Yeah.
at it. That means a lot.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. I do have one question in the spirit of keeping things looking consistent. I know that the elevations that were given to us, the drawings are not the color of the other building, but there's the comment that they will eventually match it. So
Right. Yes, I mean, other than fading as best we can, we'll order the same
Yeah.
material.
I trust y'all on that one. I'm not worried about that. But my question was then going to become, on the original drawing, there were awnings over the doors on the front and the back.
Okay.
And I was curious, was that planned for the new building to match the
With
two?
With the drop in things, it's a 4-foot overhang, the eave. So that actually shields, from rain and whatnot. No, we didn't plan on that with the additional drop that now comes close enough. The awning on that other one, the thought was that that was a water shield. And it turns out even at 20 foot, having lived there and worked there, the reason it's named Amazing Ice is that was a business I owned at the time, is to move it in there. So I've lived on the property. So when it rains, even at 20-foot eaves, the 4-foot overhang on the current building, and by the way, we're the only one that did that in our neighborhood. None of the other ones have it. So it does look a little nicer, but it does keep water off the sidewalk. It lets, people come and go a little easier. But with 16-foot, I guess don't have any scientific data to back it up, but the thought is knowing that at 20-foot it works fine, at 16-foot it should work just as well.
So my question would be to keep the two properties married, because we are trying to get the coloring and the style of the two buildings to match. Would it be something that you would consider adding just for the aesthetic kind of pairing of the
I
buildings?
guess so, if that's kind of our only hang up. I
guess
don't know what value it would add or do.
The question would be, I guess,
Yeah.
where would you want them added? So would you want them added over
Just
the man
to-
doors? Would
Just
you
to align with what you've already got on your existing property, because they were meant to be built together.
Correct.
And you just couldn't, so I guess that's up to you whether you're
I promise you, I
willing to
wish
do
we
it.
could have done that. And we wouldn't be here tonight and all the changes. It would have been, I wished we could have.
Yeah, I understand. It
The
was
sad
a
reality is the
weird
first-time
few years.
developer, the bank said, no, we're only gonna go fund one.
Yeah,
I've enjoyed living here and being a resident and owning a home here. It's a great place.
Can you go back to our current elevation, Jason? So on this elevation, we've got, to your point, could we do, if that's the case, would the condition be to add the awnings over the elevation facing 35? So it'd basically cover the buildings, the windows, basically for the front on 35, because we don't have any windows on either north and south elevation, and then you have the man doors only on the back side. And so with that, providing the awnings along 35 to mirror the imagery for the two buildings, would that work for you?
yeah, I think so. I think that would work. I was just, when I was looking at the street view of the property, I saw the awnings on the front and back of the original building. So that had
Yeah,
been what
being-
I'd,
Being candid, awning, like these type of fabric awnings are not great because they're just kind of maintenance. They rip, they fade, they're kind
Yeah,
of
they're
long-term
not-
maintenance.
They're,
It's a concession I think we're probably willing to make, correct?
I think so at this point, if that would be the only thing, but
Yeah.
it's purely cosmetic, it's worthless.
okay. Yeah. Well, some of us like pretty
Well,
cosmetic things.
that's fine, I understand. I mean, I could be more supportive of it personally if this was in a retail area, but again, working in a warehouse area,
Yeah.
I mean, the people
Well, I mean,
that come and
if I
going.
may, I mean,
Hang-
I said if I may, people are gonna work there, right? Those people
Right,
deserve
but,
something that
you
looks
know,
nice,
I
but
mean-
if we're gonna keep it consistent
Sure.
and less about it being pretty,
Okay.
the consistency of
again,
it, I think is important.
Again, just, I'm an average Joe worker and come from that point of,
But to
yeah,
your point, I don't think it's unreasonable to have it just face that 35 side.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for willing to talk with us
Yeah,
about that.
absolutely.
and-
Any other questions you
come
have,
to
I'm
an
here.
agreement. Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Any other questions for him? Okay. So to proceed with this one, we would need to have a motion. Is there anything burning for people? Or shall
I make a
make-
motion
You want
to
to,
approve the conditional use permit for the warehouse building at 161 Weldon Johnston Way.
okay. Is there a second?
Is that as presented?
As presented.
Okay.
Is there a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Vice Chair Stiegel and a second from Commissioner Webb to approve the conditional use permit. Is there discussion on that?
Yeah, I think we want to have that one awning on the side. We want that modification on there.
Okay, so what you could do is you could propose to modify the amendment, and we would vote on the modification for the amendment.
Then I'd like to
Or
make
the
a motion to modify.
Motion to amend.
Motion to amend, thank you. Commissioner Stiegel's motion
Okay,
to add the awning facing 35 on this structure. To match the sister building?
Yes, I would say essentially an awning over the set of two windows and doors, times kind of the three awnings to match the adjacent building.
Yeah, so motion to amend, right?
okay. I think, I'm not going to restate all that, but I think we're clear on what it was.
Yeah.
Now, if I remember correctly, motions to amend, do they also need a second?
Yes.
Okay, I will second that motion, so we can move into discussion on that motion to amend. Are there any thoughts on that?
My thought had just been, given our discussion, whether it is a question of durability with the particular iron usefulness of an awning in those locations. And if it's going to be anything less than, standing seam metal or some configuration like that, I really don't see the point. This area, these buildings are so utilitarian. I'm not sure how much you can dress them up if they seem to serve the purpose. So that would just be my observation on it. If y'all want to work out something about awnings, that's fine. But it's just a utilitarian space, and there's not much need or room, it seems to me, to dress it up past screening it.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I echo the same concerns there. I think I'm happy to require some additional kind of visually appealing features if there's a purpose or a function there. But in this area, I don't think it serves one, so I don't see any value in it.
So my thoughts on that are, this is facing I-35, and as people are driving into the city, if you're looking out the window and you see two buildings that almost match, but then they don't quite match, I don't know. If it's a reasonably affordable change to make, I I think it's fair that we ask for it. But that's why we exist as a body, is to vote and say, some people might say, no, that's not what we need, and other people would say, yeah, it is. So that's my thoughts.
I mean, my thought is that the argument was to not, to have a deviation because, to try to make the buildings match. The awnings would be the one thing that doesn't make them match, but also I'm kind of with your opinion. If they don't really serve a function or a purpose, and eventually in a couple of years they're gonna be faded and need replaced, I don't know if they really add any value. They look generally similar. Does the awnings make a significant change? Probably not. And to your point, they don't really serve much of a purpose. That's kind of where I stand with it. So I would keep it as it's presented.
Any other discussion on the motion to amend? Okay, we'll vote on that now. All those in favor of the motion to amend, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, motion fails. So we move back to the original motion for approving the conditional use permit of the warehouse building. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay. I'm just thankful for the patience of the applicant over the years. I know it's been quite frustrating, and we appreciate the small business in Kyle and your willingness to stick it out and work with us. So with that, all those in favor of approving that conditional use permit, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Yep. All right, 5.5, consider an appeal of the city engineer's decision regarding overhead electric service in accordance with section 50-1 for property located at 200 Veterans Drive. Ms. Sharp.
All right, good evening, Kayla Sharp, Senior Planner. So tonight we have a request for an appeal to allow overhead electric service at 200 Veterans Drive. So this is a very small little triangle lot off of Veterans near the intersection of West Center and Veterans Drive. Per section 51 of the city's code, all new electric services must be undergrounded unless they meet certain criteria in which the city engineer can allow overhead services to continue. The city engineer reviewed this request and determined it did not meet the criteria required to allow the overhead service to continue and denied the request. So since the request was denied, the applicant is appealing to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So this is the code section, section 50-1. Basically, any new services must be undergrounded unless there are, certain, if there's, a gas line or something running where the undergrounded utilities would be going. Something like that would allow the city engineer to allow overhead lines. In the city engineer's opinion, this did not meet the requirements to allow the overhead lines. So, staff analysis, no hardship has been identified that would prevent the service to be installed underground. And the city code does require all overhead services to be installed underground. Also, just to point out, if any future project initiated by the city or PEC to underground existing utilities, if the utilities on this property were to stay overhead, we would then have to pay out of the city's pocket to underground those services. And then also in the past 2 years, only 2 projects have been allowed to utilize overhead electric service. And those were on a temporary basis due to various city projects and infrastructure construction that was ongoing and not allowing for immediate undergrounding of electric. So your options tonight are to approve the appeal as requested or deny. And then based on the factors outlined in this presentation, staff is recommending denial. any questions. And we do also have the applicant here as well, if you have any questions for him.
My name is John Hall. I am the applicant, and I desire to be heard.
Could you speak in the microphone? Oh, so it can pick up your voice.
Hi, my name is John Hall. I'm an attorney here in Kyle, and I've been in this area since June 1st, 1986, and I built a home out in Mountain City at that time. I still live in that house. I built my son's house over in Hidden Oaks. I built Hidden Oaks. If you notice over in Hidden Oaks, if you know where that is, I hope you do, it's between here and Hayes High School. You notice Hall Professional Center, that's a street I built. You'll notice Merrick Drive, that's a street I built and named after my in-laws. You'll notice Princess Jennifer, which is my daughter. She didn't like having a street named after her, but I couldn't help myself. Ted and Nell Court, named after my in-laws. Johnny Hall Drive, which is my son. Jeanette Drive, which is my wife. And my son lives on Ina Court, which is my mother, who passed away in 2005. So I like doing things right. I like pretty work, too. And the building I'm building on 200 Veterans Drive is going to be 100% masonry, limestone, kind of a Texas look, I guess, stars in the front, raised metal roof, etc. And the building is right across the street from one of the city facilities. And you can tell that because it says Kyle, City of Kyle. And you notice the character of the electricity service to it. All overhead, 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 overhead. My lot is triangular in nature. Pardon me, and the lot is surrounded in the neighborhood by nothing but overhead service. Here are the forms that are in place right now. You'll see overhead, 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 overhead. Again, overhead here, overhead here, overhead, overhead, overhead. The entire community is overhead. More pictures of overhead. All around me overhead. On my lot are three utility poles because this lot has had previous overhead service. There used to be a building there, and it's gone now, but it had overhead service. Overhead service, overhead service, overhead service. The city wants me to be the only lot in this area with underground. And that would cause us to put an underground utility in one of the neighbors' yards, go under 2 sidewalks, go under 2 drainage ditches, cut through a street, and bring the electricity there. Underground maybe looks better, but I would say there's no tremendous safety value in it. And if you're looking at aesthetics, let's look at the city of Kyle. This aesthetic situation is far from what I would call pretty. And if it's dangerous, why hasn't it been redone? So we have to rule out being dangerous. If it was, the city would be obligated to redo it. And we have to rule out aesthetics. There's no particular aesthetic charm to what you see here. When you put something underground, you expose it to condensation, which leads to moisture, which leads to deterioration, which leads to rot, which leads to failure. I've had overground, I've had underground. In Houston, I had underground, and the problem is there. Now, the soil is a little bit more acidic, possibly, in Houston, but constant problems. The condensation leads to moisture, which invades all the underground materials. The splices, they go fast. The joints, the connections, they go. Underground utilities are going to last about 30 years. Overhead is going to last about 50 years. So here's some pictures of, I was just heard that we don't have gas line, but we sure do have a gas line. Here's a picture I took the other day. I'm really ashamed of my hand. The H bar is really ugly, but there it is. So caution, buried gas line. Caution, buried cat TV line. So there are some things that are buried there as well as overhead there. But here's also some pictures of, here's an explosion caused by underground utilities in Harvard Square in Massachusetts. Here's a picture of a man being electrocuted. underground utilities, underground electricity is very, very dangerous. You might be planting a bush, you might be planting a tree, you might be putting in a fence, an irrigation system, and I don't want to expose one of my neighbors to being electrocuted because the city wouldn't let us allow 60 feet of overhead wire. The plan that's been presented to you has been studied and approved and sealed by a professional electrical engineer. This project has been viewed by 3 electrical engineers. All 3 of whom said this is the best way to go overhead. Going underground, 2 sidewalks, 2 ditches, moisture, and digging up a street. You know, if this was the only situation there, it would be different. But there are hundreds and hundreds of overhead wires in place going right along my property line. I'm just asking you for 1 wire to go 60 feet in a manner that has been studied and approved by 3 professional electrical engineers. I love Leon Barba, but he's not an electrical engineer, he's a civil engineer. So I'm asking you to look at this situation and allow the prudent, the safe, and the common sense application to be made. I'm here for any questions you might have, and I will build a pretty building. I guarantee you that. You can look at the building I built over on Hall Professional Center, which I sold during COVID, because frankly, I thought we were all going to die. Thank goodness we didn't, but I did lose 7 friends to COVID, so it was a very real situation. But the only practice I have now is estate planning, because Kyle is a place that needs a lot of estate planning. At least 80% of the people here do not have their wills, trusts, and powers of attorney and all those things in place. Maybe some of you don't. But there are a lot of people in this town with that need, and I find it rewarding to work in that area, and I'll continue to work in that area. And I would like your help to help me build a safe, beautiful building right in the midst of what needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions for him?
A couple, actually. I know the city wants to push for underground utilities. The areas that he mentions, are they planned to go underground?
So we don't necessarily currently have plans in place at this time to underground lines in that area. But as any future development, whether public or private, comes up in that area, all of those lines would also be required to go underground.
And
Yeah.
again, I want to clarify, we're not asking him to underground the power poles. This would be a service line that's servicing
Yes, there.
the new business that he's constructing. So it's not removing existing poles. It's literally having the service for his new building that he's
So this is
proposing.
net new. This is not
No,
existing.
there's
Okay.
there's no new poles or anything being proposed. This is basically, if you looked through the backup material provided, there were approved plans from PEC for both overhead and underground. And the underground provided a pretty good example. It's essentially an attachment that's attached to the pole and then run underground to the building.
Okay.
So there's no additional poles or anything like that that would be required to go underground.
Thank you, Caleb.
Gail, as far as you know, is this sort of analogous to you must build a sidewalk?
I'm being
Typically,
forced to build a sidewalk as well. About a 1 year's salary going into the sidewalk. I'm not here to gripe about the sidewalk.
typically it's the same. It's a code requirement. You construct a new building adjacent to a public right-of-way, you construct a sidewalk. It kind of falls under the same, different code section, but same general
Same principle
concept.
and so forth. So the PEC, what's their stand on these things? I would like to hear that again.
I met with PEC folks, 2 of them are out there, they liked the plan, they drew it up, and it's been sealed by a registered professional electrical engineer. It's in your packet somewhere. But and I had 2 other electrical engineers look at it, and all 3 people said, yeah, that's the way to go.
And you mentioned the 3 electrical engineers were from PEC?
I think 2 from PEC. One is the electrical engineer that drew up my, Jason, help me with it, what's it called?
That would have been his MEP plans.
Yeah, mechanical electric plumbing plan, yes. That electrical engineer and a friend of mine who's retired engineer from the University of Texas, electrical engineer. We've been friends since second grade. He and I went out there and looked it over, and he said, yeah, that's the best way to go. So the professional influence is there and it's in place, and the professional judgment is to go overhead. I'm looking at 60 feet, and you saw the hundreds, thousands of feet that are already in place. Tens of thousands more likely. In a neighborhood with no underground service, and having just one underground service, the literature I looked at says most people don't look when they dig. Don't. Even if they're professional, they don't look. Even if they're supposed to, they don't look. And also the literature I found that oftentimes, professionals who are digging something run across a concrete encasement, they'll bust through that too. So looking at adding an ultra-hazardous situation to one of my neighbors, and I don't think I want to be part of that.
Can I ask a question real quick for city staff? I tried to download before the meeting the backup that he provided, the backup file, which contains the PEC drawing, like the very last image in that, I think it's 31-page supporting document. Could we get that pulled up on the screen? Because the one that I downloaded is really distorted and didn't turn out right. It looked fine on my laptop, but on here it's kind of wonky. And they're trying to look at it, but you can't read it. So
It's not really
could we get it on the screen to help the discussion, please?
Yeah, I don't know if we're not the ones sharing our screen now. We're having Grant do that for us. So it maybe if he can pull that
Okay.
Grant,
from
you're the best.
agenda.
If you'll give me a second, I'll look it up on my cell phone.
Okay. That'd be
Yeah,
good.
if you'll just give us 1 second.
And
Jason
tell
will
Grant
help
we said
him.
thank you.
So Grant is unfortunately probably used to us pulling things like this on him the last minute.
Is Grant
but
IT? I'm gonna have to buy him a
he's
beer if he's
technically
IT.
communications, but
Okay,
yes.
all right.
So we should get that pulled up in just a second.
Okay, thank you so much. I think it'll just help give some context here.
Absolutely.
Can I ask a question? Is one of the primary concerns that if things go underground in the future, the city would have to bear the cost of that work?
Generally, yes. If it's a city or PEC initiated project in the future, that would generally be on, at the city's expense. Also, just to point out, this is in a residential area. If any of those homes were, say, to be, torn down and rebuilt, those homes would have to do underground service as well. Any of the businesses up and down, veterans, same thing. Any new service lines within that area or anywhere in the city for that matter would be required to go underground unless there were certain circumstances that required overhead.
Can we get the next page?
Yeah. The site plan, there we go.
31, right there.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Thank you.
Because
Thank you,
we said there
Grant.
was 3 poles on his property. There's no power coming from those poles? Why is it coming from so far away?
There is power generated, but the next 25
Transformer?
AVA transformer is across the street. So it's not far, but it is across the street, and it is in the neighbor's yard. And again, I don't want to endanger their children, their families, by putting ultra-hazardous materials in their yard.
Which side of the street is it? Where do you have to cross? Veterans or?
No.
Across-
The other side, that's Barbie, not Barbara, but Barbie Street at Blanco.
I have a quick question for city staff on this. Given what sounds like the extreme dangers and hazards of underground electricity, why is this the new standard that we're going to?
So generally, underground is considered more reliable if there's, say a storm. Overhead electric is more likely to, have your power knocked out. Undergrounding is a little bit more reliable as it's not exposed to those elements and things like that. Typically, the dangers are fairly minimal. I can't say they're non-existent because that wouldn't be the truth. For overhead or underground, there's always going to be some sort of hazard, but generally, when they're undergrounded, they're wrapped in like conduit, so they're not exposed to the elements underground and things like that.
So have we experienced any of the dangers or hazards that are kind of being presented about underground electricity here in
No.
Kyle?
Not to my knowledge. There's always the occasional, telecoms and things that have been, accidentally cut when repairs are being done in the area. But as far as power and things like that, we, to our knowledge, have not seen any of that happen. Or if we have, it's been restored fairly quickly.
On the other
I
hand,
ask,
if it's,
I echo that question.
I think we can all Google it if we had a question about that, but I'll pass the questions along.
I was just going to make an observation myself, is that right outside the door here, we had a power pole that met with an accident that had a impact for a week perhaps. So in my view, poles are a problem, just generically in terms of welfare and safety, as well as aesthetics. Live in a development that has all underground. I've lived with underground, believe it or not, in the country, and it's more reliable than power provided through the poles. So I would like to hear more, perhaps, about the case to be made. I'm looking at diagrams, but if PEC seems to be in favor of this, right? The kind of construction.
Yes, they were kind of surprised that Kyle came up with this rule.
Yep.
And there's a
PEC is aware of our requirements for undergrounding, and as you'll see in the backup, they did provide plans for both overhead and
All right, so there's a
underground.
conflict there, and part of the conflict is fiscal too, that we would eventually be paying the money to take it underground if it were to be so required.
I have no idea if that's the situation or not, but all literature I've reviewed says underground utilities are going to be good for about 30 years. So I'll be pretty old in will that be, when it comes around 2050, I believe. But you're going to experience a lot of failure in all your underground because the lifespan of most of this is going to exhaust itself in that year after 30 years. Again, you can't keep moisture out. You can't. When you bury something, expect it to rot because that's what it will do. We'll all be fine, but the next generation is going to have some challenges. And it's going to be a wonderful day for the people who sell all that stuff and service all that stuff. Because underground utilities cost a lot more to begin with, and knowing that you're going to be able to replace them in a mere 30 years, what a windfall for those folks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for him before I go? Okay. So one thing that I noticed in the documents we had today was that there was not an alternate plan shown of how it would be undergrounded. Now, I heard you mention tonight that it would go under 2 sidewalks, 2 drainage ditches, and a road.
Neighbor's yard.
Could someone kind of point us on this map where those would go so we can conceptualize this?
If you'll look at the upper right-hand segment of the drawing, and unfortunately my old eyes can't see all that well. That's the corner there of Barbie and Blanco.
Mhm.
And the telephone pole, it has a little red box around it, can't see what it says, but that's a telephone pole. And it already has an existing wire there overhead where the blue is. And all I'm asking really is for an extension from that bottom blue line across the street.
Yes, sir, I understand that, but what is the city asking you to do? What
City
do
is
they
asking me to
want?
go underground under 2 ditches, 2 sidewalks, a street, dig up the street, and go dig through part of the neighbor's yard and place an ultra-hazardous equipment upon their property.
So it has to cross that street. That's my main kind of question at this point is digging up, like trenching through a street and replacing that. Is that cost being carried by you? Okay. Okay.
I mean, it seems like that's kind of the nature of buying a property that is in an island surrounded by 3 streets, right? That's a code that everyone else has to follow, wherever the electricity's coming from.
I
They're
believe-
taking it underground
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah. So
This
hang
is
on.
an island property.
Hang on, I had the floor still.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But that, I understand what you're saying. I'm a creep. I went on the Hayes County Appraisal District website and I looked at this property. You've owned this for quite some time, right?
Yes, I'm through, Mr. Lutz, what is your title again?
Currently, I am the interim planning director.
I've been through 3 planning directors working on this. I've been at this for years.
Yeah.
Years.
So,
Spent untold amounts of money on it.
yeah. So city staff, when did the ordinance to underground everything happen? Was it after he bought the property?
I'm not sure what the exact date is on the ordinance. I know it.
2020, and I bought it in 2018.
Backup
It
on the
is in the-
engineer's letter.
Yes, it's in the backup as part of the engineer's letter.
It was June 2nd of 2020.
Okay, so.
And you looked at the CAD, when did I purchase it? Do you recall that? I think it was 18 or 17.
I don't remember the exact year.
But
I know it was before
2020,
2020.
so
Yeah.
that was not a cloud upon my horizon at the time.
Yeah.
I looked at a nice lot, nice location,
Mm-hmm.
close to the city building there, and
Yeah.
a lot of good traffic, and a place I think I could make a really nice, durable contribution to the appearance of the city by building a beautiful building and doing something I think is a really good and appropriate profession to help the citizenry here. If I were to ask you folks, how many of you have done your estate planning, I'd be surprised if more than half of you have. I'm doing something that's really valuable. I'm helping people.
Okay. Thank you for that information. Are there any other questions for Mr. Hall?
Yeah, actually, to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, when was the building approved to be built?
So the building was just approved at the end of 2024, I believe. I want to say site development permit started in 2023, if I
So
remember
well
correctly.
after we went underground.
Well after the ordinance requiring underground was implemented, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Sharp.
And a reminder that I did buy the property prior to the ordinance.
Okay, any other questions?
No, I'll make a motion to deny.
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Webb and a second from Commissioner Hauk. Any discussion on this one? Okay, just me. I think that what you've done in the city over your years here is very commendable. And I had the privilege of voting for your beautiful building, Miss Aesthetic Girl. And I think it's a very charming place that'll look very nice in this area. And I just think it's insane that we would make you pay to dig up a road instead of just putting one overhead line. I know that there's an ordinance that says that's the way it's supposed to be, but I think that this is an unusual circumstance, and I don't think that it would set a precedent for future projects that we did where we would grant that exception every time. I think this is a unique situation here, a unique building in the community, a unique figure in the community, and I cannot in good conscience say that he should have to pay for something like that. So I'm going to be a no on the denial for this one. Is there any other discussion on that motion?
Just a comment to reinforce what you said, I believe, is that as I've seen the building develop and then I understood what the business was, I think it brings distinct value to the west side of Kyle and actually is a resource for all of Kyle. And it's in a good location on a piece of land that would be hard otherwise to use, I think. So I've much held that in esteem. And because of that uniqueness and because of the history here in PNC of only seeing 2 applications to use overhead lines in my term here, and those being both temporary, I see this as being very exceptional. And I'm not sure, given the nature of that area right there, what else is going to happen in that area. I have a suspicion other things are going to happen in terms of development. So that makes it, this is a transitory piece of territory, this entire area, in my view. And I'd be inclined to say, okay, a single line above ground, I think may be justifiable in this instance. Because when I'm looking at this, it's not only the value of the package here to the community, but I'm really looking at that part of town. You see the tanks across the street, you see these ancient apartments whose, you know, give no value to the neighborhood. Those are going to eventually go. And there's going to have to be a larger solution than one wire to this building, in my view. So I'm perhaps mistaken, but I'm trying to take a large, you know, a 30,000-foot view of what's happening here, rather than just zeroing in on this line. So I appreciate Leon Barba's position, and I understand where the city is at in trying to get things underground. Believe me, I value that. But in this particular instance, I think an exception can be made.
Any other discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I think, so I have the pleasure of serving as the president of my neighborhood's HOA, and one of the things I hear all the time is, my neighbor doesn't keep up their lawn, why do I have to keep up mine? That doesn't really hold water with me. Just because somebody else isn't doing something, I don't think means that everybody gets an exception. And as we're trying to update the infrastructure in a given area, somebody has to be first. If we approve this exception, the next person that walks in here, and if it were me, I would say, hey, you approved 200 Veterans Drive, now you have to approve mine. If this is kind of the way that we're starting to update that infrastructure, we've got to start somewhere. We have city staff that does their job for a reason, and they recommend that we deny this, and I think that's the way I'm going to go as well.
I mean, I'll say it again. I think it's just a consistency thing, you know? Like I said, I think it's just a consistency thing. You know, if we're going to say that it's the code that these wires belong underground, then that's the way. And we can discuss changing the code, but as it stands now, that's the way it is.
I just don't think that our code should make Mr. Hall pay to rip up a road. This isn't the martyr that we need to make, in my opinion, because there's going to be people who come to us and they just want to put a line straight through dirt. You know, that's different than having a small business have to pull up and replace a road. I don't think that it would be, if it was a big apartment complex, for example, that was trying to go across the road, or some sort of center that had more financing, more investors, yeah, you know, I think it's fair to have them perhaps make the example, start the chain. But for a figure in our community who's been here for this long, who's added this much, who's put this much thought into building something aesthetic, that's the end of my thought.
I'd like to add something here. I had originally brought up the analogy of sidewalks being required. And it happened down here in the downtown area that a couple had come from out of town and had bought a property already that they planned to build on. And they had not anticipated this, but on a corner lot, they were going to be required to build a sidewalk all the way around the corner lot for thousands and thousands of dollars. And I know they brought this to the council's attention, at least one council member and so forth. And as I recall, that got worked out, that the sidewalks would be required if there was like 4 units on the lot or something similar to that, that was higher density, that you would then require the sidewalk of a new builder and owner. So this is one reason I brought up the analogy of the sidewalk, to see if we're being consistent overall in how we're working with people in the community who are bringing businesses and homes here. This business in particular, I don't care really what the business is. I think it's a value on its own, in my opinion. But we're looking for infill. And you know, this is a classic case of infill. I don't know how many times I've driven past that lot and wonder what the hell would ever, excuse my French, would ever be done with it. And we have a good professional building going in there. So I like to be consistent in my own way, and where I'm consistent is with the fact that the city was willing to make changes around code regarding sidewalk requirement because they saw the burdens it put on owners. They changed it. So in that case, it's a working analogy for me. In a similar situation, I would say, okay, this is a burden on a single owner, and this will come up again. I guarantee you, when those nearby apartments are trashed and something decent goes in there, the whole issue of underground will come up again, and we'll see if there's a feasible way for the gentleman to connect his property to the new infrastructure. That's my view. But when we're looking at infill, I think we have to be very cautious about creating disincentives for people to infill spaces that are not used in the city. Very thoughtful, because the people who are doing that are not the big developers who can outrun us in the game, who've got all the engineers and the plans, who've got all the finances to do it the way they want and finesse every bit of it. You know, we've got that. I'm looking for people to really develop these lots around downtown and take the risk of coming here. And so that's just my position on supporting the appeal and voting in its favor.
God bless you.
Well, I don't know if God will bless me, but I'm trying to be consistent in my own views.
I appreciate what you're saying. It's hard for an individual businessman who's not backed up by Target or.
There is a motion on the table.
Thank you. Given that there's a motion on the table, is it too late to ask city staff a question?
I actually don't know the rule on that. I think we can ask questions during this discussion. Yeah.
So the question I had is mentioned a few times that in order to put this line underground, the road would have to be torn up and then I'm assuming repaved. Is that the correct procedure or practice for how these are put in? Are lines able to be run under the road without tearing it up?
Generally, there's two ways you can do that. You can do a bore, and that's where you get a machine, you start in the right of way and you bore underneath, avoiding infrastructure, things of that nature. Other than that, it would just be a cut. So you take a sawtooth and you cut your little trench, you lay it, you do whatever the electrical requirements are, PVC, conduit, pea gravel, and then you compact your base and put it back, and then you have a patch of asphalt. So those are the two ways you can do that.
Thanks.
This would not be a repaving of the entire street, if that's what the question is. It would just be the responsible for their
Or just that
stretch.
strip?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
I fear that's only part of the answer. Would I be required to get a permit for that? Would I be required to get an engineering study?
You wouldn't be required to get an engineering study. Your permit would be part of your electrical, a part of your building permit to run that line.
I've already been told once when I wanted to move a small thing around, I had to pay another $1,500 fee to have it looked at again on a small thing. So this is a larger thing than before. So it sounded like to me I'd have to pay a fee and hire an engineering firm.
I'm not sure what you were told and what, I mean, I can't speak to that. You know, if you're trying to make an apples to apples or apples to oranges comparison, I don't know what that is.
If there's like a revision to the site plan or maybe a right-of-way permit, there is an expense to that, but other than that,
Mr. Lutz, you were the one who told me I had to pay $1,500.
Okay, guys, I believe there's
there is
still a
still a
motion on the
motion on
floor, so discussion's limited to up here. Thank you.
Any other comments from the dais? Okay, well, let's go ahead and make a decision. So based on the comments I've heard up here, I just want to remind commissioners what we're voting on here. The motion is to deny the appeal, or no?
Yes.
To
The
deny
motion was to
appeal.
deny the appeal, yes.
Deny the appeal, okay, which would mean that he has to underground it. So just want to make sure everyone understands what we're voting on. All those in favor of Approving the motion to deny the appeal, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Nay. Motion carries. Or motion is denied. So then do we have to do a second?
You have to do another
Okay.
motion.
I'm going to make a motion to approve the appeal of the city engineer's decision. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay, motion by myself, a second by Vice Chair Stiegel. Is there any discussion on this one? Okay, all those in favor of approving the appeal, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
There we go. Okay, that motion passes. Thank you, sir.
God bless y'all. Thank you for your time. I bet you'd rather be home watching Sopranos or something. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, which brings us at the end of this exciting meeting to our adjournment. We've completed all the items on today's meeting agenda, so there's no further business that can be discussed, and we are adjourned at 7:50.